Just why is Resident Evil 4 such a good game, even still, and how they changed the gaming industry. Released in 2005, Resident Evil 4 is a survival horror game which left an unstoppable mark on the gaming industry. Developed and produced by Capcom, they first released it onto the Nintendo GameCube. Soon after, they brought out editions on the PlayStation, PC, and even the Nintendo Wii. Resident Evil 4 was set in 2004, 6 years after the Raccoon City incident. The game follows Leon S. Kennedy as he is undergoing a mission to rescue the president's daughter, known as Ashley Graham. RE4's most significant change was the over-the-shoulder camera view. This was a radical departure from the original horror game series, which originally had static camera views and tank-like mechanics. This switch allowed for a much more immersive and intense experience, allowing gamers to aim and shoot more precisely, giving a more fluid and realistic experience. The departure from the original zombie-like enemies and the introduction of the new Ganados enemies were a massive change to the Resident Evil series as a whole. These enemies being faster, more intelligent, and quicker to adapt to their surroundings than any other zombie game before it. This required gamers to adapt a completely new style of combat. As the Ganados were able to use new weapons and tactics to evade your attacks, they were a much more intimidating enemy than previous games, forcing gamers into a completely fresh combat system. The tone of the game is masterly set by the village section, as Leon is thrown in the deep end and is forced into a very tense survival situation. This is where gamers are pushed into coming to grips with the new mechanics, and it is also the first time that we encounter the horrific and terrifying new chainsaw enemy, otherwise known as Dr. Salvador. As this section of the game concludes, we hear a distant bell ringing. This ringing stops all of the Ganados in their tracks and compels them to forget all about Leon's presence, as they are now bound for the church. Regardless of this, Leon must push on further through the village, fending off against more Ganados, dodging boulders, and even dynamite. Eventually, he reaches a dingy cabin in which he can hear loud banging. As Leon investigates, he discovers one of the most memorable characters called Luis Serra. Although this introduction is short-lived, as they are interrupted by no other than the Big Cheese, who is also known as Bitores Mendez. Mendez is an absolute tower of an enemy, and Leon is quickly shown to be seemingly powerless against him. Leon is knocked unconscious by Mendez, and as he is out cold, we get another quick introduction to the main villain of the story, who is known as Osmond Sadler. After unknowingly being infected with the Las Plagas parasite, Leon finds himself strapped to Luis Serra and is attacked by an axe-wielding Ganados. After breaking free, Leon continues on his mission to find the president's daughter and comes across a lake, which just happens to be the dwelling of a giant mutated salamander. Leon once again overcomes this challenge by throwing harpoons and eventually cutting the line which binds him and the salamander. As Leon has no other choice but to continue on his journey, he is solving puzzles, fighting more Ganados, and is eventually introduced to an extremely terrifying enemy known as El Gigante. El Gigante was once a normal human like the rest of the Ganados, but the parasite within him has grown at massive rates compared to the rest, turning him into this giant, hulking monstrosity of a being. Leon is trapped in this arena, and El Gigante is released out of his cage. Seemingly not under the same mind control as the rest of the Ganados, El Gigante fights and kills many of the Ganados that have kept him captive. As Leon is facing challenge after challenge after challenge, he is eventually helped by no other than man's best friend. A white wolf in which we saved at the very start of the game returns the favour and helps Leon be victorious. Continuing after this, Leon eventually frees Ashley Graham and is met once again with Sadler.
If you must know, my name is Osmond Sadler.
This is where he reveals the plot to infect Ashley with the parasite and then send her back home to the US, so that she can later infect her father, and then Sadler will have complete control over the US. After escaping with Ashley, the next encounter we have is with the Big Cheese. As he is the final boss of the second chapter, we will have to compile all of the experience that we have had in order to defeat such a formidable foe. As you've seen in the previous chapters, this is no easy task. And he reminds us once again, as he literally bends the iron door handles. With a swift dodge and a shot on an explosive barrel, we assume that we've injured him, but all that we have done is pissed him off. We watch him mutate right before our eyes into this elongated, insect-like humanoid. And this is where the fun really begins, as he attacks us with ferocity that we've not seen so far in the game. We have to literally fight for our lives. After a hard battle, we take him down and we watch his gooey eye literally roll out of his skull. It turns out that his eye is a key for the gate which we previously passed, so holding it up to the scanner opens it up for us. This is where we are quickly introduced to the next section of the game, the castle. After quickly taking out some oncoming traffic, Leon and Ashley begin getting chased by more Ganados, so they have to run away into the castle. It is at this point where we are introduced to the new occultist enemies. These are hooded figures that now have a range of weapons from scythes and even crossbows. At the beginning of this chapter, they also have massive catapults. This is how the game ramps up the next experience to come. Instead of having Ganados with pitchforks and torches, we now have religious fanatics which have gone absolutely insane. We quickly run into our friend Lewis again. He lets us know that he has some medication for us which can slow the growth of the parasite, giving us more time to get it gone. Unfortunately, he's lost them along the way and has to go back to retrieve them. This is where we are introduced to the next mastermind, Ramon Salazar. A very little man with a massive personality.
I've been expecting you, my brethren.
He's also accompanied by his two things. God knows what they are or what they've come from, but they do not seem like any other human around. Quickly leaving these guys, we find a tied up Wolverine-like motherfucker who is blind, and the only way to kill him is by shooting the parasite in his back, which allows us to shut off the fire and continue even further through the game. Once again, the game tests our skill under pressure with a room full of Ganados, being ambushed from every side, left, right, up, down, scythes being thrown at you, bolts being fired at you. So in this jam-packed section of the game, the player is tested once again how they will cope under pressure, which is an amazing thing to do because it's a perfect centre point for the game. After all this, Ashley is captured once again, and we are forced underground by Salazar. I think we should all just take a moment and realise just how stupid Ashley is in this scene. As we enter the sewer section of the game, the horror levels vamp up once again with invisible enemies, which you only first notice by watching this goo dripping out of their invisible mouth and a glowing light for the eyes. But once again, we quickly get through this part of the game, lowering some water, evading some giant swinging axes, and are introduced back into a bit of normality, with a room full of Ganados and a religious fanatic who's praying to a sigil. After forcing you to experience a lot of horror, we now delve back into a much more action-packed scene of the game, which is essentially what this game is all about. The game quickly and masterfully changes your perception on the game by introducing some heartache when the relationship that we've built with Lewis is quickly ended right in front of us. A character in which we've all come to love and felt was truly out for our best interests is gone, but not before giving us the medication in which he said would help. This adds another level of emotion to the game, vengeance. The game becomes not only about a rescue mission, but also about avenging Lewis. We get a short mission where we get to play as Ashley. This is a perfectly used mechanic which shows us just how defenseless she really is. as quickly after rescuing her, she is quickly abducted once again. Where the game seems to take a break from its action-packed seriousness and starts to make little jokes with a giant dummy and perfect hand placement for a knife. We then finally get to fight off the next boss of this chapter, who looks absolutely disgusting as he dies, and we head over to the new part of the game, the island. The game once again shows us that it's not finished, increasing the difficulty, with stronger Ganados with guns, regenerators which just don't die no matter how many bullets you put into them, and the much worse version, the Iron Maiden, which is a regenerator coated in spikes. We once again save Ashley, jump down a rubbish chute, and fend off another 2 Iron Maidens. The game here shows us a huge character arc as Ashley takes control of the vehicle we're riding and helps us get through the next mission instead of just being a hindrance. But as you had probably guessed it, this doesn't last long as Ashley is once again captured by Sadler. The game quickly becomes more nostalgic after this, by introducing us to old characters from Leon's past, and even the laser room, which we all remember fondly, and is pretty much a staple to the Resident Evil series as a whole. This part of the game once again uses the perfect timed button mechanic, which doesn't seem like it should really work, but it really does in this scene. After this, we are introduced to the classic enemy, U3, who reintroduces the horror back into the game as we have to run through a maze-like scene, shooting buttons to open doors, pulling levers on doors so that we can get through this cage, all while being hunted by a terrifying beast. See, now I think that this part of the game really brings back that horror vibe which we've been missing, especially when we finally escape, thinking that we've killed U3, only for us to be chased once again into another scenario where he's going to attack us. This is where the final showdown with U3 takes place, and it is a cataclysmic end for this tortured soul. After essentially scaring the shit out of us with this monster, we're thrown back into a much more action-packed part of the game once again to fight our old friend Krauser. Not before retrieving 3 medallions and having a couple of hand-to-hand combat situations with Krauser, we eventually fight him once again for the final showdown, where he transforms his arm into this horrific blade, which he also uses as a shield. But like all that came before him, he goes down without an issue. After this battle, we then get a tragic scene where we get probably the shortest relationship in gaming history. Mike, a helicopter pilot who comes to our rescue in the final battle of the Ganados. But quickly after this heroic scene, he is shot down in front of us and enrages the player to once again seek revenge. We now watch the transformation of Leon as he attacks Ada, and his eyes glow red as the parasite seemingly takes control of him once again. Leon pops a double dose of his medication and goes on to rescue Ashley for the final time. Not before being met with Sadler, who gives him an absolute wallop of a hit, sending him flying back and smacking against the glass, showing you just how powerful Sadler really is before the final battle arises. We run away with Ashley as Ada blows up some explosive barrels blocking the way so Sadler cannot follow us. You actually get to play this as a mission in the separate campaign called Separate Ways, where you fight as Ada. This is another masterful thing that the game did, giving us multiple points of view on the same story. Once the gamer has removed the parasite from both Leon and Ashley, we are led to the final battle between Sadler. It's at this point of the game where we show Sadler that he no longer has any power over us, and we fight him one-on-one, testing both of our skill for real. As Sadler transforms right before our eyes, pun intended, transforming into this strange spider-like creature, Ada comes to our rescue by throwing over a rocket launcher, which we use to finally take down the mastermind Sadler. With a final cinematic cutscene watching a rocket fly at Sadler's face and ultimately blowing him up, killing him once and for all. Ada Wong shows her true colours by putting a gun to the back of our head and then fleeing with the sample that we've just found. She hovers in a chopper for a while and explains to us we need to get off the island as she's setting off a self-destruct sequence. but not before giving us a key to a jet ski, which we used to flee, ultimately concluding our journey of saving Ashley, and ultimately proving to everyone why this game will forever go down in history as one of the best.